Hi everyone, welcome to Unacademy IS English. My name is Jatin and I will be taking the discussion for UPSC CSC Mains 2026 General Studies Paper 4 Ethics, Integrity and Aptitude. Before I get into the detailed discussion on each and every question, the approach that you must have taken, the answers that you would have provided in order to get the maximum marks out of the examiner, let me give a broad analysis of the paper this year. Some of the topics that we are used to seeing in the paper were missing in the paper this year, including the topic of emotional intelligence. Quotation based questions, which are also a regular feature of this examination, have also been missing in the paper this year. There are a lot of questions that have been asked from the area of administrative ethics. Literally, no questions have been asked from the topic of attitude. A lot of questions related to the topic of ethics in international relations have also been asked. Even in the case studies, we have seen a slight difference from the past, where a couple of case studies were new and innovative in many ways. There has been a lot of emphasis on technology, on artificial intelligence, which is something which we expected to happen in the ethics paper sooner or later. So that's my broad understanding and analysis of the paper this year. And I would also say that if you have been solving the previous year questions from 2013 onwards in a proper manner, you would not have faced a lot of problems in this paper. But again, the real challenge and the key to success in the entire mains examination, and not just general studies paper 4, is how well you manage your time, is how well you are able to write the answers to all of those questions within a span of 3 hours. And that is what really determines success as far as this examination is concerned. तो अब आगे बढ़ते हैं and let me discuss each of the questions in detail, starting from the case studies. But before that, I have an important announcement to make. I would be having special classes on the Unacademy Plus platform tomorrow and day after, that is 25th and 26th of August. The first session is going to be about how one prepares the subject of polity, not just for prelims, but for mains in a comprehensive manner for UPSC Civil Services examination. The second session, that is organized on 26th, will be related to reading newspapers and how can one actually read the current affairs and integrate them into one's preparation in an effective manner. Both of these classes will be live on the Unacademy Plus platform. You can go and register yourself. This is going to be free of cost. The link for the joining of these classes and description and more information has been provided in description of this video. So please go and check it out. I would be seeing you in the class. Now, let's begin with the first case study that was asked this year. This is a case study which was related to consent of a patient when they are undergoing some kind of medical procedure. So there were certain questions of medical ethics as well as that of consent and bodily autonomy and dignity of an individual which were associated with this question. Let's have a look at what the case study was. The case study says that Lata is a mother of two and she was admitted with acute abdominal pain. Her sister-in-law Sujata accompanied her. So she was having acute abdominal pain and then she was admitted in the hospital accompanied by her sister-in-law. Dr. Mansi is the doctor who's going to treat her. Recommended a diagnostic laparoscopy under general anesthesia for which Lata gave consent. So Lata has given consent for a medical procedure to be operated or to be done on her, which is that a diagnostic laparoscopy needs to be done under the effect of a general anesthesia so that we can determine that what are the medical conditions that she is facing. During the procedure, the team discovered a uterine tumor, so a tumor in her uterus, suspected to be malignant, suspected to be something that could be cancerous and dangerous to her. The doctor could either take a biopsy, possibly requiring a second surgery. So they could do a biopsy and then they could understand what the tumor is all about. They could do some analysis and then there may be a second surgery that may be required in such a situation, or immediately remove the uterus itself, where there is absolutely no danger that is going to be associated with the tumor going ahead. As Lata was unconscious, so Lata is still in an unconscious state, Dr. Mansi explained the situation to Sujata. Sujata gave written consent for hysterectomy to avoid the risk and pain of another operation. So this basically means removal of uterus. This particular term, even if you don't know the meaning of this term, it does tell you that it is related to removal of uterus. I don't even know how to pronounce it properly. To avoid the risk and the pain of another operation. Lata was informed the next day, once the surgery has already been performed, because the doctor thought that it would be better to perform the operation because she would not have to go through another surgery, and it would also avoid the risk of the malign tumor which is present in her uterus. She felt betrayed because she had never consented to removal of her uterus. The only thing that she had consented to in this case was that a diagnostic laparoscopy to be performed on her. The police, Sujata and Dr. Mansi believed that doctor had acted with good intentions. But Lata decided to approach the court. We have to discuss what are the ethical issues that are involved in this case, and we have to discuss the moral conduct of the doctor, whether what the doctor did was right or wrong from a moral perspective. Now, in this case, firstly, what is the core conflict which is at the core of this entire case study? The core conflict at the core of this entire case study is that can an individual who is subject to some kind of a surgery or a medical procedure, whether their consent, and that too informed consent, is more important, or whether it is the benefit of avoiding the second surgery that is more important. The second issue, of course, in this case is that the consent which was provided by Lata initially was diagnostic, specific consent. So can that specific consent which was provided by Lata for a specific diagnostic procedure, can that be enlarged? Can it be enlarged to a bigger surgery? These are the two moral issues which are at the center of this conflict, and ideally in your introduction you should explain these two moral conflicts that exist in this case. Once I have done that, the second aspect is what are the ethical issues that are involved in this case, because that is what the examiner is specifically asking us. In this case, you may also, in the introduction, want to mention about the stakeholders, those who are involved in this case. So that's also one of the approaches that you can take. Anyway, let's talk about what are the ethical issues that are involved in this case that one needs to be aware of. First ethical issue is that of an informed consent. Is an informed consent required from an individual before some kind of a medical procedure is performed on them? Secondly, is a temporary and a diagnostic consent enough in such a case to perform a substantial surgery on a patient? The third is with respect to, can we perform an act on a person which is irreversible in nature? Now, I'm writing only the pointers here, but when you will write in the examination, you will have to specifically expand them into one sentence each. That can, without informed consent, a surgery be performed on a person? Can a diagnostic content be considered as enough in such a situation? Can an act which is irreversible in nature be performed without the consent of a person? The other ethical issue is that were other options available, were other least harm options available, and if they were, why were they not explored? The other aspect of this is that the dignity of Lata is under challenge and her right of bodily autonomy is also under a threat. So there is a threat to bodily autonomy. There is a threat that is happening to her right to life under Article 21. And of course, there is a dilution of her right that is happening here. Now, the other important thing is the police and her sister-in-law and the doctor believe that because the motive was good in such a situation, it is being equated to absence of wrongdoing. So the last ethical concern is that the police, the sister-in-law, as well as the doctor believe that since the intention was good, it means that there was absence of wrongdoing as well. There was an absence of wrongdoing also that was involved in this situation. So these are some of the ethical issues that were involved in this case that we need to explain to the examiner in one sentence each. Do not spend and waste a lot of time on giving detailed explanation to the examiner because one, you have word limit, and second, you have time limit. So there is no need to go into detailed explanation of each of these aspects. If you can just explain some of these aspects in a sentence or two, that should be enough. Now, the question is that we have to also discuss conduct of Dr. Mansi in this situation. Now, first of all, if we look at the conduct of Dr. Mansi from a positive perspective, of course, she acted promptly in this situation and she tried to save a patient's life, which is the most important duty that is supposed to be performed by a doctor. So she was simply performing her duty. So she observed her duty as a doctor, her professional duty towards her profession. The other thing is that she was doing this with the idea of compassion in her mind to reduce the pain that the patient would have to suffer if they have to undergo a second surgery. The third aspect that we can mention is that they did not perform the surgery without taking any kind of consent at all. So they consulted close relative of the patient and then consent was taken, was obtained before any kind of medical procedure was performed on Lata in this situation. Not just that, but the cost which will be involved in such a situation would also be lesser because the patient would not have to undergo the treatment twice. Okay, so these are some of the arguments that we can give in favor of Dr. Mansi's conduct or positives associated morally with respect to her conduct. But at the same time, there are certain concerns morally that have been raised over Dr. Mansi's behavior and conduct in such a situation. First and foremost is that she crossed the authorized boundary that had been set for her as far as Lata providing treatment is concerned. Lata being given treatment is concerned. She was given a permission only for performing a minor operation on the patient and she went ahead and made a major surgery out of it. Then the other aspect is that there was no life-threatening situation which was involved in this case. And therefore, we could have waited for the diagnosis to come out and only then perform the surgery, and that too with consent of Lata. So because of that also, it is something which is wrong. The other aspect which we can say is that the medical information and knowledge in this case was preferred by Lata over or by Dr. Mansi over the rights of her patient. So the rights of the patient to give informed consent was given a second priority over the medical information and the know-how that the Dr. Mansi had in this situation. So this is one of the things that we can mention are the concerns. The fourth is that it also may raise suspicion in the minds of the patient that possibly this kind of a surgery was done only to increase the hospital bill and to take more money from the patient who's involved in such a situation. The fifth aspect which we can mention here is that the act which was performed by Dr. Mansi was completely irreversible in nature. So she ideally should have exercised caution, and she lacked caution in her approach in this situation. So these are some of the aspects that we can mention about as far as conduct of Dr. Mansi in this situation is concerned. Now, the point that we can conclude the answer here is that, of course, if this would have been a situation where there would have been a life at risk, let's say if Lata was diagnosed with a severe kind of a tumor which had to be removed immediately, and there could have been no delay possible at all, then in that case it was correct to go ahead without informed consent. Even without informed consent, it would have been ethically, morally justifiable. But in this situation, Dr. Mansi, because she went ahead and performed surgery on her patient, even though life was not at risk, it was a decision that was probably taken in haste, and it was a decision that did not exercise enough caution, and therefore this is something which is not justified as per the ethics of medical profession, or this is not something which is justified as far as the actions of any doctor is concerned. Now, what could have been a better course in this kind of a situation is also something that we should suggest to the examiner. So what is that a better course would have been in this situation? So a better course would have been to perform a biopsy, take a biopsy sample. That biopsy sample should have been sent for analysis. In the meantime, Lata would have been conscious, and one could have taken the consent from Lata in such a situation. The other thing which could have been done is that the doctor could have taken a prior consent from the patient. Knowing that you are a doctor, you would know that in such situation there is always a possibility of a patient being diagnosed with such kind of tumors. So a doctor should have shown more foresightedness. A doctor should have shown more foresightedness in such a situation, should have analyzed the situation better, should have been better prepared for such an exigency, and ideally they should have taken prior consent from the patient himself or herself before performing any such major surgery on the patient and going ahead. And let's say even if after the analysis the doctor found out that the tumor is indeed malignant and it needs to be removed at any cost, then the doctor should have ensured that they explain the findings to the patient in a compassionate manner. In a compassionate manner. So that is what we can say as far as this particular case study is concerned. This was a very unique and a new kind of a case study which had been asked by UPSC, which they have not asked earlier, but then something which could have been solved if you had applied some basic logic and some basic understanding of what are the ethical cases that are involved in such a situation. Now, let's move on to the next case study. Ravi is an experienced senior police officer. He's SP of a riot-prone district. 6 months ago, the district introduced AI-enabled predictive policing software. Now, this is a very riot-affected district, and this is a senior police officer who has introduced some kind of an AI predictive tool. What AI predictive tool does is that it is able to tell us what is going to be the possibility of some people being involved in crimes. It captures biometric data from the crowds and matches it with a data library, helping identify persons, those who are involved in crime, so that you can avoid crimes from happening before they actually happen. Then the system identified an immigrant and low-income neighborhood as a center of gang violence. So now the predictive and AI analysis is able to find that the center of gang violence is a low-income neighborhood, and it is also a place for drug trafficking. police consequently increased the patrols in such an area, and they also started to carry out preventive detention and introduce various nakabandi and checkpoints in that particular area. And public order has after that visibly improved as far as people are concerned. Now, after that, once this happens, the community leaders, civil rights lawyers and activists now allege that system relies on historically biased data created by discriminatory policing. So there is discrimination that is being exercised against this particular neighborhood because there is historically biased data with respect to the involvement of the people of that community in crime, but which is not exactly correct. They state that surveillance has produced fear and that residents do not know what data is being recorded against them. So information is being collected about them without their consent. And these people are also living in a constant situation of fear as well. What are the ethical issues that are involved in this case, including biases that arise from AI data-driven policing that is carried out in this situation and is now catching up as a popular trend, not just in this particular case, but across India and across world. As Ravi discuss the alternatives and justify the action that best complies with the ethics. So as Ravi, you have to tell what are the alternatives that are available in this situation as the SP of this district, and that what are the actions that best comply with the ethics, or what is the best ethical course to be taken in this situation. So firstly, again, in this situation as well, we have to analyze what are the various core issues that are involved. So always start your answer by talking about the core ethical issues that are involved in any ethical case study. First and foremost, in this case study, public safety is going to be in conflict with the idea of equality. Why is it that people, those who are only belonging to that particular neighborhood, are being subject to scrutiny and being subject to the Preventive Detention Act being carried out by the administrative authorities? The second aspect which is there, which we can mention, is the privacy of individuals is at risk in with law and order. We can also say that the privacy of individuals is at risk with duty of an officer in order to enforce law and order in their area. We can also mention that it involves the idea of law and order enforcement coming into conflict with the idea of or the principle of equality in the society. So these are the core issues that are involved in this case, and we may also mention that ultimately what are the stakeholders also, those who are going to be affected as a result that will be or as a result of any of the actions that will be taken in this situation. So once we have mentioned the core issues and the stakeholders, those who are involved, stakeholder of course will be the police department. The stakeholder involves various civil society activists, and it includes lawyers and all the other people, those who have approached you. It also includes citizens, those who will be subject to this kind of scrutiny, and it also involves the rights of the community, which is going to be affected as a result of this surveillance being imposed on them, because they are the ones which as per AI have been identified to be the ones, those who are most mischievous and also prone to making some kind of errors or performing some kind of crimes, including drug trafficking. Now the question is asking us what are the ethical issues that are involved in this case, and that's what we are going to be answering now. Firstly, when I talk about the ethical issues that are involved in this case, historic data that is being used to feed the AI in this situation may be biased in nature, because there are some people, those who have performed some crimes in the past. Now their data is there in the records of the police. They are using that data in order to feed the AI, and then the AI will tell that maximum possibility of the criminals existing in this particular district are from this neighborhood, and therefore there is a positive feedback loop that is being created because of this historic data, and there is a bias that is going to be involved in such a situation massively. The second thing that we can basically what we can say is that there is a positive feedback loop that is being created because of the historic data that is feeding into the decision that is supposed to be taken in this case. Then the second thing which we can mention is that it is going to violate the privacy of individuals, especially that of the entire community who are being subject to some kind of surveillance where they do not even know what is the data that is being collected. So there is always a challenge with respect to the whether the actions that are being taken by the police and whether the surveillance that is being imposed by the police is actually proportionate to the objective that one is trying to achieve. The fourth is, as it has been mentioned in the case study, that it has created fear among the minds of the citizens, where they are thinking that for any small thing that we do, the police may come into the picture and they may start arresting us or preventively detaining us. Therefore, the bigger challenge which is involved in this case is the chilling effect on freedom of speech and expression. So there will be possibly a chilling effect that may happen on the freedom of speech and expression in this situation as far as the ethical issues are concerned. This chilling effect that may happen on freedom of speech and expression was the same thing that had been mentioned by the Honorable Supreme Court of India in the case what we know as the Shreya Singhal case related to Section 66A of the IT Act. We can also say that there is a degree of automation bias also that is built into this particular case, because the machines can be biased themselves the way they have been trained and the way they have been created. So that is also something that we can mention. We can especially mention here with respect to false positives. There was a study that had been performed in United States of America where AI was supposed to, on the basis of pictures of a large number of people, tell who are the people, those who are most prone to committing crimes. Now, when AI ran this analysis in US, there were certain pictures of congressmen or the representatives of people in the American parliament also that were included in the database, and the AI created false positives where a large percentage of these congressmen were also declared as possible criminals in the society, in the American society, by this AI model. So there is always a possibility of a bias creeping into the actions of the AI, which we need to essentially highlight as to why this is a very dangerous trend which is being set here. Now, in such a situation, what are the options that are available to the SP? So what are the options that are available in this situation to the SP involved? Let's discuss about that. See, the first option that is available to the SP is that he can continue with the situation unchanged. Now we have to also explain the merit and the demerit of the same. Continuing unchanged would have its own merit, that they would not need to change anything and law and order would continue to be enforced. But the negative which will be associated with it would be that the trust of the citizens in governance would decline significantly, and it can lead to legal problems as well. So those are the points that we can mention as far as the negatives of this situation is concerned. The positive aspect of this situation, of course, is going to be that there will be establishment of law and order, and law and order would be strengthened further as a result of these actions being taken by the district agency. So that's the first thing that we can mention. The second aspect that we can mention is that he can go and suspend this entire initiative immediately. Now, again, in this case as well, doing this immediately would have its own advantages. One of the advantages will be that we will be able to save time and we will be able to prevent any other further violation of the rights of the citizens. But it would also lead to a negative aspect in terms of weak law and order enforcement, and drug trafficking would resume in these areas. And therefore, we can say that it would amount to almost wastage of time and effort by all the police officers. The second aspect is that it would also mean, if it is suspended immediately, that law and order situation may deteriorate and the drug trafficking situation may also go up in this particular area. So that is the second option that is available to the officer. The third option is the one which I will be suggesting to the examiner, where I would say that there should be a controlled pause that should be introduced on this activity. तो देखिए, अब आप पूरी तरीके से बंद करेंगे तो भी प्रॉब्लम है, पूरी तरीके से चालू रखेंगे तो भी प्रॉब्लम है. तो क्या हम कंट्रोल्ड पॉज इंट्रोड्यूस कर सकते हैं, वेयर वी आर डूइंग ओनली सम काइंड ऑफ selective analysis by the AI and not a full-fledged analysis. And this should be extended into a full-fledged analysis only when there is an audit that is performed. अगर एक ऑडिट परफॉर्म हो जाए जहां पर पॉसिबली कम्युनिटी के रिप्रेजेंटेटिव्स भी हों, who will tell that whether the AI that is being used, the surveillance that is being imposed on them is correct or not. And once they give the go ahead, then this selective analysis can be increased into a larger analysis that can be performed in the society. तो ये एक पॉइंट तो हम यहाँ पर कह ही सकते हैं. दूसरी चीज जो हम इस सिचुएशन के अंदर ये भी कह सकते हैं that ideally what we can do is that the citizens should be notified. अगर ऐसा कोई भी सर्वेलेंस मैकेनिज्म हो तो नोटिफिकेशन इशू होना चाहिए सरकार की तरफ से, टेलिंग द सिटीजंस इन फ्यूचर दैट एनी सच एक्टिविटी विल बी टेकन अप. द सेकंड थिंग इज दैट we need to get a legal opinion as well on whether this is constitutionally justified to perform such kind of activities. So ideally, as the SP of that district, you should get some kind of legal verification also done for such an software that has been introduced. The third is that there is a need to improve the training data so that these false positives that may also come up may be avoided in future. So improve data training. And that for that to happen, for the AI, they need to have some data in place, and that's where the police and the district authorities are going to come into the picture. इस आंसर को कंक्लूड करते हुए मैं ये कह सकता हूं that simply because the policing is being done in an effective manner, it does not mean that it is moral also. So policing being effective is not the same as being moral. Right. So one of the things that we can basically mention as far as this is concerned is that, see, one example is that even the colonial police in India was very effective, but were they actually moral? The answer to that will be no. Right. So you can conclude with something like that in your answers. Anyway, let's move on to the next case study, which was asked by UPSC this year, and this is related to the approval that is supposed to be provided by the government for some kind of act and some kind of major backlog that has been created in the industrial area. So let's read what it says. Seema is an honest and efficient senior bureaucrat, and she's posted as district collector of Surindarnagar, where a large industrial area is being developed. Many farmers have applied for change of land use, where their land can basically be changed into commercial use, creating a major backlog. Now, basically, all these approvals that are supposed to be given for change of the land use have to come from the administrative authorities. Some applications were selectively approved without chronological order. So many of the applications came from the citizens, and many of them were approved without any kind of first in, first out kind of a basis. Files contain complaints that approvals followed payment of large bribes. So a lot of people have actually taken bribes within the department in order to provide approval to these particular change of land use applications. Seema discovers that touts working through subordinate officials control the illegal activity. So there are middlemen, those who are controlling the illegal activity in the government department. Other employees are fearful and avoid processing applications. Now these people are fearful of two things. One, if we go ahead and act in such a situation, then there is a possibility that we may get some kind of backlash from the touts and from the other individuals. But if we do not do anything, then and also if we do something, then people may think that we are actually doing it because we have taken bribes, even though we are honest officers. Now, this reluctance on part of the subordinate officials is further, as we can mention, will worsen the delays, and economic loss would occur, and there will be public dissatisfaction as well. An aggressive inquiry may create institutional resistance. So there may be a lot of institutional resistance within the institution, within the department itself, to any such aggressive query being carried out, and union backlash as well. So the union of the officers may also be up in arms against the concerned officer. Ignoring the network would encourage corruption. So if I ignore whatever is happening right in front of my eyes, where the middlemen are involved in getting the approval for the government servants to be giving approval to the citizens for change of land use, then it would encourage corruption, and it would prolong public harassment as well, because ultimately public would not only have to pay the taxes, but public would have to also ensure that whatever they are doing is actually going to be the public harassment is also going to be there, because their work will not be done properly. Now, what are the ethical issues that are involved in this case? We have to discuss the options that are available to Seema in this case, and we have to recommend and justify the best option out of the options that she has in this particular situation. So what is it that we can mention as far as this question is concerned? See, this firstly, the question is inspired from a 2016 question that had been asked by UPSC related to approvals and bribery in a case. So there was a case that the court as UPSC had given with respect to approvals and bribery related case in 2016, which is, one can say that this particular case study is merely a rehash of what the case study was in the earlier years. Now, what is the core issue that is involved, or the core conflict that is involved in this case? Let's try to understand. The core conflict involved in this case firstly is that we want to ensure swift action against corruption. We want to ensure swift action against corruption versus continuation of work. If any kind of inquiry is instituted in this case at this point of time, it would lead to affecting the continuation of the work as well, and the work would get further paralyzed. The second aspect that we can basically mention is that it is also something which is unfair to the employees as well. So the allegations of corruption that have come up against the government officers, especially the ones those who are honest, is unfair to the employees as well. So these are some of the basic things that we have to start with. Let me also tell you that this question is inspired from another previous year question that was asked by UPSC in 2019, which was related to whether non-performance of duty by a civil servant, when the civil servant fails to perform their duty properly, then in that case, can we call that also as an act of corruption? क्या हम इस situation को भी act of corruption बता सकते हैं, नहीं बता सकते हैं? So that is the core conflict that I have to highlight in my answer in the beginning. Now, once I have done that, I have to go further and I have to talk about what are the ethical issues that are involved in this case study. So the ethical issues that are involved in this case study, firstly, is that bribery itself is unethical, that is being taken by the government officials, and not only is it unethical, but it erodes faith in government institutions. It erodes faith in government institutions. We can also say that bribery promotes rent-seeking behavior. So that's one of the terms that our students from political science and from the public administration optional will be able to tell what is the meaning of the rent-seeking behavior. The other thing that we can mention is that there is selective approval that is taking place. So there is selective approval that is taking place in this situation, and it basically is a violation of Article 14 of the Indian Constitution. It reflects arbitrariness on the intent of the state, and it also is something which is going to create problems. It's a punishment for honest officials, where with the dishonest ones, even the honest officials in the government will be considered as the dishonest ones by the public. And then the other thing that we can mention is that if the backlog continues, that in itself is going to have several ethical implications, including on the ease of doing business as well as the rights of the citizens as well. Right? So it also sends a very wrong image of India within and outside the country as well. And the last point, ethical issue that we can mention is that if the inquiry is aggressive, there is a possibility of backlash from the union as well. There is a possibility of backlash from the union as well. So these are some of the ethical issues that are involved in this case. We can then say that this backlash of the union is going to affect impartiality and also going to compromise the courage of some of the government officials as well. Now, in this situation, what are the options that are available to the concerned officer? So what are the options that are available in this situation? Options available in this situation. The first option that is available in this situation is that take out all the suspects who are there in your department and transfer these suspects. Okay, now this will show that there is prompt action that has been taken on the demands of the citizens, but at the same time there would be a challenge which would be raised because of this, where it would also shift corruption elsewhere. See, the problem of corruption is not going to be over if these corrupt officers are transferred somewhere. ये कहीं और जाके भी corruption कर लेंगे तो तब भी कोई चेंज नहीं पड़ेगा. तो पहला तो ऑप्शन जो है हम वो ये दे सकते हैं. दूसरा ऑप्शन जो हमारे पास अवेलेबल है वो है that we carry out sudden mass raids. एक सडन मास रेड्स और अग्रेसिव इंक्वायरी कंडक्ट किया जाए. अगर हम ये करते हैं तो अगेन इससे विजिबल एक्शन दिखेगा. It will show seriousness on part of the administration and on part of the government, but it would also have possibility of paralyzing the work of the department and therefore suffering, and therefore ease of doing business and industrialization in the country would suffer as a result of the same. The third option which could be there is that we entirely outsource the entire activity to some third party agency. तो किसी third party agency को हम ये पूरी तरीके से काम सौंप दें, पर इसके अंदर बहुत सारे कंसर्न्स होंगे. एक तो प्रिवेसी कंसर्न्स इन्वॉल्व होंगे. द सेकेंड चैलेंज विच इज देयर विद द idea of outsourcing this entire activity to some private company in order to, or some private organization or some NGO in order to verify the claims, it would have the advantage that it would make the things faster, but privacy would be violated. And then the second challenge associated with this will be that there will be questions that will be raised over legality of this as well, that whether it is okay for a private organization or the non-governmental organization to be doing something like this. So this is what we need to mention as far as the options available to a government officer in such a situation is concerned. Now, what is the action that you would actually take in such a situation which would be ethical? If I were in your place, this is what I would recommend to the examiner. The first thing that I would tell the examiner is that there shall be no collective action that should be taken in this case. किसी भी तरीके का कलेक्टिव एक्शन नहीं होना चाहिए. घुन के साथ गेहूं के साथ घुन नहीं पिसना चाहिए. सो देयरफॉर देयर शैल बी नो कलेक्टिव एक्शन. रादर whatever punishment that is supposed to be imposed on the erring individuals, it should be done on an individual basis. So that's one of the things that should be done in this case study. The other thing that we can also mention is that we can carry out a suspension of those officers against whom we have prima facie some kind of evidence of a wrongdoing or corruption or bribery being taken on their part. The other thing which I would recommend in this situation is identify some of the whistleblowers in the department and provide them adequate protection, so that they are the ones, those who will be acting as the source of information for the police and for the agencies to truly enforce accountability on such officers. The other thing that we can mention is that we can bring in some transparency via technology as well. So some transparency via technology can also be brought in this situation, is something that we can mention. And while we go ahead and carry out these aggressive raids and punishment on an individual basis, we must engage the trade union as well and try to understand what are their grievances beyond the issue that we are working on at this particular point of time. Another thing which can be done in this case study is that we can involve the citizens via social audit mechanism in order to verify the claims and the property papers of individuals, those who are desirous of the change of land use in the way their land is used. Okay, so these are some of the things that we can mention in this case as far as case study number 9 is concerned. अगर मैं आपकी जगह होता तो मैं इस आंसर को एंड कैसे करता? मैं कौटिल्या के कोट से एंड करता. सो जब भी हम एथिक्स इन पब्लिक एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन पढ़ते हैं, हम कौटिल्या के व्यूज भी जानते हैं ऑन पब्लिक एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन. कौटिल्या के पर्सपेक्टिव से आई वुड हैव सेड दैट व्हाट कौटिल्या हैड सेड, दैट सिविल सर्वेंट्स आर लाइक फिश इन वाटर. जिस तरीके से एक मछली कितना पानी एक टैंक में पीती है और नहीं पीती है, उसी तरीके से इट इज इम्पॉसिबल टू टेल that how much money a civil servant is making out of bribes and is making out of corruption, because it is almost impossible to tell the same. So these are some of the pointers that we can mention as far as Kautilya's, as far as this particular case study is concerned. Now let's move on to the next one. The next case study is also a very interesting case study. This one says, Vikas, who is a government officer with over a decade of experience, is positioned as or is posted as a district collector of Nanipura and a remote hilly district near a forest. So this is a remote hilly district near a forest. A major responsibility of this officer is to ensure the PDS functions for economically weaker section. तो ये सब एक remote hilly district है, वहाँ पे लोगों के पास और कोई साधन तो होगा नहीं, सरकार ही एक तरीके का साधन है for them to get some kind of help and assistance in form of ration. And the core function of this officer Vikas is to take care of the enforcement of the PDS. Now, to prevent leakages, distributors of the government must conduct real-time fingerprint authentication against identity records. So they must conduct real-time fingerprint identification, and authentication often fails due to growing children, manual labor, and senior citizens, especially during poor Wi-Fi connectivity. तो इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर कंस्ट्रेंट्स भी हैं कहीं ना कहीं, और दूसरा टेक्नोलॉजी भी कभी कभी फेल कर जा रही है. डीलर्स देन यूज पर्सनल डिस्क्रेशन. तो उस केस में जो डिस्ट्रीब्यूटर्स होते हैं वो पर्सनल डिस्क्रेशन यूज करते हैं व्हेन दे रिकॉग्नाइज बेनिफिशियरीज. स्ट्रिक्ट कंप्लायंस प्रोटेक्ट्स फिस्कल प्रोबिटी. अगर हम स्ट्रिक्ट कंप्लायंस करेंगे रूल्स से तो इससे फिस्कल प्रोबिटी इंश्योर होगी, इससे करप्शन बचेगी, इससे डिस्क्रेशनरी पावर का मिसयूज रोका जाएगा. बट कैन डिप्राइव वल्नरेबल पर्सन्स ऑफ food and implicate Article 21 of the Constitution. Unregulated dealer discretion may cause misuse and leakage. Now, therefore, the question is, what options are open to Vikas in this situation? How should he be balancing fiscal probity with empathy? तो जो fiscal prudence बना के रखनी है, probity बना के रखनी है, integrity बना के रखनी है fiscal process की within the government, how should that be balanced with empathy? Discuss the ethics of using technology as a gatekeeper for welfare schemes. What are the positives of using technology as a roadblock or as a gatekeeper for delivering of the schemes to the citizens of India? And then on top of that, what are the arguments which are leveled against this particular situation is also something that we need to be aware of. Now, let's look into, therefore, what our response to this case study should be. Firstly, again, the same thing that has to be done in this case study is that I must tell what are the core conflicts that are involved in this case study. तो core conflict क्या है इस case study के अंदर? सबसे पहला देखिए core conflict जो इस case study के अंदर है वो है financial probity versus compassion towards weaker sections of the society. Now, how do I end up answering these questions? सिंपली बिकॉज अगर मैंने फाउंडेशनल वैल्यूज ऑफ सिविल सर्विसेज एक टॉपिक है वो उसको ढंग से पढ़ा है, मैं बहुत सारे क्वेश्चन इसके अंदर आंसर कर सकता हूँ. द सेकेंड कोर कॉन्फ्लिक्ट विच इज इन्वॉल्व इन दिस केस इज दैट देयर इज अ लीकेज दैट इज गोइंग टू हैपन वर्सेस द कंपैशन दैट में बी एट रिस्क. तो अगर मैं कि हर इंडिविजुअल को सिंपली कंपैशन के बेसिस के ऊपर ये राशन ऑफर कर दूंगा, देन देयर इज अ पॉसिबिलिटी ऑफ लीकेजेस एज वेल दैट में अकर इन सच अ सिचुएशन. द थर्ड कॉन्फ्लिक्ट दैट एग्जिस्ट इन दिस केस इज फूड सिक्योरिटी ऑफ एंड राइट ऑफ एन इंडिविजुअल आर्टिकल अंडर राइट टू लाइफ under Article 21 of the Constitution versus legal compliance versus law, what it says. So these are the core conflicts that are involved in this particular case study that I need to be aware of. Now, firstly, let me talk about what are the options that are available to this concerned officer. The first option that is available to Vikas in this situation is that they should strictly follow and continue to follow biometrics, or basically continue to follow the rules that have been made, and there should be no violation of the rules that should happen in this situation. The second solution that is available for the officer in this particular situation is that they should allow discretion to be exercised by the dealer in such cases. अब अगर हम स्ट्रिक्टली बायोमेट्रिक्स को फॉलो करेंगे तो उससे क्या इंप्लीकेशंस होंगी, अगर हम डिस्क्रेशन ऑफ द डीलर फॉलो करेंगे तो उससे क्या इंप्लीकेशंस होगी, हम ऑलरेडी डिस्कस कर चुके हैं. द थर्ड थिंग इज दैट सस्पेंड द यूज ऑफ टेक्नोलॉजी डायरेक्टली और कंप्लीटली. सो कंप्लीटली सस्पेंड द यूज ऑफ technology because it is creating challenges for the citizens, and if it is creating challenges for the citizen, what is the purpose that it is going to be serving anyway? And then the fourth one is that there shall be no denial in general to any person who approaches for the ration from the ration shop, but at the same time we can mention that there has to be some kind of objectivity, or there has to be some kind of verifiable exceptions that can also be made for some people. Okay, so that's the point that we can basically mention as far as the course of action is concerned. Now, what else can I mention as far as the course of action is concerned? इस situation में मैं ये बोलूँगा कि denial नहीं होना चाहिए in general cases until and unless there is something which is glaringly wrong with the record of that particular person for getting the benefits under the PDS scheme. Now, what I can also mention is that what ideally we should do is that we should try to use technology and some alternate form as well of verification. Alternate form of verification could essentially include something like iris scan, or I can be doing some kind of other face scan as well on a person. But while any of this is performed, you are collecting more data of the citizens, and therefore it should be done only on the basis of a law. It should be done only on the basis of a law, and it should be something which should be legitimized, and it should not be going overboard with the collection of the data of the individuals. अगर ये alternate technology mechanism भी fail कर जाता है, उसका reason क्या है fail होने का? Because of poor Wi-Fi connectivity. We have to remember that this is a very remote area as well where there is poor Wi-Fi connectivity. तो हो सकता है कि आप कोई और तरीके से स्कैन करें और वो तरीका भी फेल कर जाए, तो उस सिचुएशन में there should be a physical document option that should also be available. Those people can come out with their physical documents, and what can be done is that they can be given the supply of ration subject to verification that should be done by the community. तो हम ग्राम सभा से या कम्युनिटी की किसी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन से ये वेरिफिकेशन करवा सकते हैं subject to some kind of verification like that. So that is one of the examples, or that is one of the things that we can basically say here as far as dealing with this particular situation is concerned. तो एक ये तरीका भी हो सकता है. और तीसरी चीज जो हमें करनी चाहिए, irrespective of anything, दोनों ही circumstances के अंदर हमें ये रिकॉर्ड करना चाहिए. Record the reasons for making exception where people would not be provided their ration in a timely manner because their fingerprints are not matching. So that is one of the things that we can mention as far as this situation is concerned. और इसमें क्योंकि बहुत सारे बूढ़े लोग हैं और बहुत सारे manual labor हैं, those who may not be able to avail of the services under this, we can also consider introduction of doorstep delivery services for such elderly and poor people. So instead of them coming to the government offices or to the department or to the ration shops, there should be some kind of doorstep delivery of the services that can also be introduced in this case. तो ये तो हम कह सकते हैं, these are the suggestions that can be given as to what act can be taken up by or what action can be taken up by Vikas in this situation. अब इसके अंदर आगे बढ़ते हैं and let's talk about a couple of other things as well. See, what we can mention is, as far as technology becoming a barrier is concerned, we should mention that technology has multiple advantages. और वो multiple advantages of technology आप list कर दीजिएगा. These multiple advantages of technology, for example, we know would include that it would provide access to some of the poorest sections of the society. It would make things more accessible, affordable. It would help in bringing transparency and accountability in the functioning of the government and provisioning of the services by the government to its citizens. But at the same time, despite its advantages, technology should not be a barrier. Technology should not be a barrier. इसमें हम ये भी कह सकते हैं that the ultimate responsibility is that of the government. तो अगर वहां पे वाईफाई नहीं है तो भी ये सरकार की रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी, और अगर बायोमेट्रिक नहीं चल रहा है तो भी ये सरकार की रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी है. बट वी मस्ट रिकॉग्नाइज दैट this is an entitlement that has been created for the citizens as a right for them to get ration. So in the name of technology or in the name of various other roadblocks, we should not lead to violation of their right, which is a part of Article 21 of the Indian Constitution, as a right to as a right to nutritious food that every individual is supposed to have. और इसमें लास्ट सेंटेंस में ये बोलूंगा कि टेक्नोलॉजी का रोल एनेबलिंग रोल है, टेक्नोलॉजी का रोल लोगों को मदद करने का रोल है, टेक्नोलॉजी का रोल खुद एक रोड ब्लॉक बनकर किसी भी तरीके की बाधा क्रिएट करना नहीं है लोगों के लिए. सो दैट इज वन ऑफ द थिंग्स दैट आई कैन मेंशन एज फार एज द रोल ऑफ टेक्नोलॉजी इन दिस सिचुएशन इज कंसर्न्ड. नाउ so this was a case study और बड़ा ही इंटरेस्टिंग केस स्टडी था, बट लेट मी ऑल्सो टेल यू कि इस तरीके की केस स्टडीज यूपीएससी पहले भी पूछ चुकी है, एंड दिस इज समथिंग विच हैज बीन इन न्यूज रेकरेंटली अ लॉट ऑफ टाइम्स. एज अ सिविल सर्वेंट यू शुड नो हाउ टू बी बैलेंसिंग रूल्स विद कंपैशन. Before I move further, I also want to make a small announcement. We are coming out with, for the first time, an advanced mains program on the Unacademy Plus platform. You can go and enroll in this course, which is starting on the 2nd of October. We will be doing a detailed discussion and analysis of each of the topics that are important for the mains examination, along with PYQ answer solving, question solving, as well as answer writing practice on a weekly and on a regular basis. The classes for polity and governance would start with on 2nd of October. I will be teaching the subject of polity and governance along with Sarmat sir, and also the ethics classes begin on 2nd of November. That would also be taken by me. The details with respect to this course are available on the Unacademy platform. You can go and check out the more of the details there. Now let's proceed further. The next case study is a very interesting case study related to the idea of impartiality, and I would say that to a large extent this case study has been inspired from whatever was happening in Manipur, and one was expecting a case study like this to appear in the examination this year. So let's look at what the case study is. It says that Rajapuram is a border district where Jhara and Biru communities remain in conflict. Now this is the border district of India. Violence over land claims, unequal resource allocation, and inadequate political representation has caused many deaths. So unequal resource allocation, lack of political representation, and the violence over land claims has been the biggest cause for violence between these two groups. Separate relief camps exist and situation is volatile. So they have been put in separate relief camps and the situation is extremely volatile at this situation. Rajan has been appointed as the district magistrate to restore authority and law and order in this area, and to also reopen the highway and to initiate peace talks between the community. He discovers that communal rivalry has entered the administration and the police, and destroying the functional neutrality of the police itself and public trust. A neighboring country may exploit the disorder to promote insurgency in this area. So there is an outer threat as well, and the police itself has now completely lost its neutrality and has taken sides. Now Rajan proposes first reopening the highway to restore food and medicine, because that's most essential, and considers requisitioning CRPF to send their units to bring law and order under control. What are the ethical issues that require attention in this particular case, and what are the options that are available to Rajan? Which one would protect Rajan's non-partisan image without compromising the ethics that are involved in this particular case? Now, this case study is the one which is related to, one can say, the issue of impartiality. So this case study is all about impartiality, right? I hope that you have been able to recognize that value which needs to be highlighted in this particular case study. Now, what are the important core issues that are involved in this case? See, first and foremost is impartiality versus the urgent restoration of law and order that is supposed to be done in these areas. So urgent restoration of law and order is at conflict with impartiality in these areas is one of the things that we can mention. The second aspect that we can mention here is that the conflict that exists where there is a reconciliation that has to be done in the society. So reconciliation and peace, and one of the ethical consideration that we should keep in mind is that we want to establish long lasting peace in this situation, right? So long lasting peace is supposed to be established, not a piecemeal measure to be taken, right? So those are some of the core ideas that are involved in this case study. Now you can also mention that this is very similar to the situation that had evolved in Manipur a few months back. Now what are the ethical issues that are involved in this case that I should highlight to the examiner? See, the first and the foremost is the ethical issue of the impartiality on behalf of the state, where I can mention about Article 14 of the Constitution. Right? So impartiality and upholding of Article 14 of the Indian Constitution is the first challenge which is there. Then the second is that any kind of bias on part of the police may end up completely destroying the trust of the citizens in the legal system, and they may then take law into their own hands, and it may lead to what is called as vigilante justice, and it may lead to further violence as well. So we have to avoid any such kind of situation where the image of the police is going to take a beating in front of the eyes of the people. So that is one of the things that I could mention here. Then iske alawa aur kya cheeze mention ki ja sakti hain? I can mention that there is a human angle that is also involved in this case study, right? So there is a humanitarian angle that is involved in this case study, because if the highway is not restored, then in that case the supply of the essential items is going to get affected. The poor, the elderly, the sick are going to be very badly affected as a result of the same. By the way, in the last class there was some problem related to the audio, because the audio had been recorded only on one channel, right? So because of that, many of you, when you were putting in the earphones, you must have heard it only on one side. I'm extremely sorry for what happened in that session, but मैं उस सेशन को फिर से री-अपलोड कर दूंगा अपने YouTube चैनल के ऊपर, जिससे कि कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं हो. Now anyway, there is a human angle that is also involved in this situation, because the highway is affected and the food supplies are going to get affected very badly. The other thing is that whatever force that is used, so use of force by police or by the state agencies in any such circumstance should be satisfying the principle of legality. तो ये भी एक ethical issue involved है इन situation में, और कहीं पे भी excessive use of force नहीं होना चाहिए. We also need to ensure that there is protection of women that happens in these areas, protection of children and the elderly especially taken care of as far as these areas are concerned or this conflict is concerned. दूसरा इसके अंदर जो एक बहुत major ethical issue involved है वो national security का भी है, right? National security is also at threat as a result of this conflict arising. And the last one is, this is also an issue of lack of political representation. So this is not just a law and order issue, but this is a political issue as well. There is lack of political representation or lack of political autonomy for the community, as a result of which they have been involved in this kind of conflict. Now, what are the options that are available to me in this situation, and what is the recourse that I can take in this situation? Let's try to understand and explore that. So firstly, when I talk about the options that are available to me in this situation as district magistrate, first and foremost is that I rely completely on local police for restoring the law and order in the area. But this is very dangerous, even though this will be quick and this will be the simplest way to restore law and order in the area, but there is always a risk that is involved, because we already know that the police itself has also ended up becoming biased in this situation. The second option, so this is the first option that is available. The second option that is available to the district magistrate in this case is that they get the CRPF involved and CRPF led coercive action to be taken, where they should unleash force in order to restore the law and order in the area. Now, even though this again is a quick and a simple fix, and this is not only quick and simple, but this is definitely going to be effective in restoration of law and order as well. So this will help in restoration of law and order, but there is a challenge that is associated with this. The biggest challenge that is associated with CRPF being involved in this is that it may further create distrust between the citizens and the government. And as a result of that, people may want to still take law into their own hands, right? So that is also one thing that we can mention. This may be a challenge from that particular perspective. The third option that is available to me in this particular situation is that I go ahead and I keep the highway closed, and till the time the negotiations are going to be completed, I keep it closed. So negotiations first between both the communities and then the highway to be opened. Now this again has its own positives because this will help in ensuring the resolution of the dispute first, and then it will go into any other kind of solution or the kind of situation that has to be evolved in this case. But the problem is that it would keep the highway closed, and that would have a significant human cost associated with it. तो इससे एक significant human cost भी associated होगा, and that's one of the things that we can mention here. Okay, so that's what I can mention are the options available. But what is the option that I will actually take as district magistrate in this particular situation? I would say that I will call for CRPF in a limited number, but at the same time not be availing the police services. So because the local police is already biased, so CRPF needs to be brought out in a limited number. But when the CRPF come in, there is always going to be a possibility of bias on part of the CRPF as well. So this has to happen under a watchful eye and supervision. We can have body cameras installed on the CRPF personnel so that they don't misuse the power. The first thing is what I would suggest is this. Second thing which I would suggest is that the highway be opened in a limited manner as a goodwill gesture, and we should tell the communities that both the communities can use it, and we need to show neutrality in the usage of the highway by both the communities. The third thing that should be done simultaneously with these two things is that we should start holding negotiations, and we should start holding talks with the groups as well as to what their concerns and challenges are. The fourth thing which can be done is that we can rope in senior leaders, religious leaders, important people from both the communities to come and sit together and to help in resolving the dispute in a proper manner. So that can also help in creating a goodwill among the people as well. The next point that we can also mention is that there shall be immediate relief that should be provided to the people, those who are affected in these camp areas. And this immediate relief we need to ensure is impartial completely. For that to happen, we need to have some kind of a technology tool that we can use in order to ensure that there is impartiality that is followed. इसमें मैं SOPs की भी बात कर सकता हूँ that need to be laid down to be followed by all the officers. Okay, so that is one of the things that we can mention as far as this is concerned. And then the last aspect that we can also mention is that ऐसे police officers जो कि visibly partisan police officers, those people need to be transferred. उन लोगों को ट्रांसफर करना जरूरी है so as to restore the faith of people. So this is what we can mention. इसमें मैं अगर एंड करता तो मैं गांधी ने जिस तरीके से नोआखली के अंदर जाके लोगों के बीच में ट्रस्ट एस्टैब्लिश करने की कोशिश की थी, and how he had shown courage and how he had shown extensive impartiality, I can mention that. Not just that, but I can also mention what Yudhishthir is told by Bhishma in Mahabharata, where he tells him that one of the most important duties of any king or ruler is to showcase impartiality. They should not treat their citizens in a biased manner. Any civil servant should be looking at their citizens as an equal, and they should treat them as their children. The way a mother would never discriminate between children, a civil servant or the government or the king should also not discriminate between his subjects. Now, let's move on to the last case study, which is case study number 12. Now this case study is very similar to a case study which was asked by UPSC in 2023, which was the भारत मिसाइल case study. तो इसको जल्दी से डिस्कस करते हैं. इस केस स्टडी में क्या हो रहा है? अजीत, who's heading the Department of Weapon Sales in Ministry of Defense Production, has successfully produced long-range artillery missiles for India that has attracted buyers, but production constraints permit only one order. एक ही ऑर्डर ले सकते हैं हम. कंट्री ए जो हमसे ऑर्डर लेना चाहती है इज अ डेवलपिंग, टेक्नोलॉजिकली केपेबल, नॉन अलाइंड नेशन सीकिंग प्रोटेक्शन फ्रॉम अ ट्रबलसम नेबर. So their reason for seeking the access to technology is because of a troublesome neighbor, and they also are a technologically capable nation. They are a developing nation like us, and they are also non-aligned to any other bloc. India plans next generation defense R&D with it. It seeks a large acquisition through a long-term loan. So they are looking for getting the acquisition of this weapon, but they are looking for large acquisition, but थ्रू अ लॉन्ग टर्म लोन. तो हमें पैसा इमीडिएटली नहीं मिलने वाला कंट्री ए से. कंट्री बी ऑन द अदर हैंड इज अ डेवलपिंग नेशन that prioritizes military expenditure over human development. So they have their human development problems, but they are still prioritizing military expenditure. It is aligned with superpower hosting a major base, maybe US, Russia, whatever, belongs to an economic bloc negotiating an FTA with India. Possesses nuclear weapons despite being outside the NPT, so they do not really have much of regard for the international law. Supports guerrilla forces abroad, so they are supporting some kind of rebellion also abroad in some other country, and seeks a smaller purchase. So their order is going to be smaller in number with advance payment. They will be making advance payment. It is also negotiating with another supplier, not just India. Ajit's colleagues emphasize economic benefits, employment and diplomatic gains, and argue that refusal will merely shift the sale elsewhere. Now in this situation, Ajit knows that arms export demand rigorous due diligence under national policy and international obligations. We should not be giving arms to any country which will be misusing them against its own citizens or for some other purpose. Discuss what are the options that are available to Ajit in this situation, which one should he choose and why, and lastly, how can national economic and strategic interest be balanced with ethical considerations purely. The second part is a question of ethics in international relations. So what are the things that we will be mentioning in our answer related to this question? Let's try to understand that. देखिए सबसे पहले तो again इसमें मुझे core conflicts highlight करने की जरूरत है. Now I am going to be telling you one core conflict in this case, and I expect you to write in comment what are the other core conflicts that are involved in this case. One core conflict is revenue versus human security, jobs versus human security, because there is a possibility that these two weapons may be used against the humanity and against mankind itself. Because ऐसा भी तो हो सकता है कि लॉन्ग रेंज मिसाइल जो है वो कंट्री कोई गुरिल्ला वॉरफेयर के लिए नियर बाय गुरिल्ला वॉरियर्स को ही देते, या उनका ट्रैक रिकॉर्ड भी ऐसा है इंटरनेशनल लॉ के रिस्पेक्ट में कि वो इंटरनेशनल लॉ को वायलेट करें इसको करते हुए. सो दीज आर सम ऑफ द कोर कॉन्फ्लिक्ट, बट आई वांट यू टू आइडेंटिफाई द कोर कॉन्फ्लिक्ट्स एंड डू लेट मी नो इन द कमेंट सेक्शन. नाउ लेट मी proceed further. What are the options that are available to the officer in this case? See, the first option that is available is that India goes ahead and sells these weapon to country B. कंट्री बी को वेपन बेचने के देखिए बहुत सारे एडवांटेजेस और डिसएडवांटेजेस हैं. एक तो ये हमें एडवांस पेमेंट मिलेगा, तो दैट इज वन एडवांटेज दैट इज एसोसिएटेड विद इट. सेकंड इज दैट दिस कंट्री वुड आल्सो बी because of that we will be getting jobs and there will be an assurance of the order that will be provided to us. The concerns which are associated with country B procuring this weapon is that they have a poor international track record and therefore they may end up using these weapons in a wrong manner. Secondly, मैं एनपीटी के बेसिस के ऊपर कह रहा हूँ. दूसरी बात हम ये कह सकते हैं कि हो सकता है कि ये गुरिल्ला वॉरफेयर को सपोर्ट करने के लिए इन वेपन्स को यूज करें. So they may use it for guerrilla warfare. That's also one of the things that we can mention as far as country B's involvement is concerned. Country B के केस के अंदर ये भी एक risk involved है that it may draw the ire of international community. हो सकता है international community जो है हमें इसके लिए बाद में जिम्मेदार ठहराए कि हमने एक गलत कंट्री को वेपन बेच दिया. So that those are the concerns which are involved in this case. The second option that is available to us is to sell this to country A. Country A, the advantage of course is going to be that this is a large order, so we are going to get a significant amount of money. Secondly, because they are non-aligned just like us, we have shared values with them on certain areas. यहाँ पे आप जो मल्टीपल आइडियाज हैं एथिक्स इन इंटरनेशनल रिलेशनशिप के, रियलिज्म के या कंस्ट्रक्टिविज्म के, वो सब भी यहाँ पर लेकर आ सकते हैं. Idealism, realism, constructivism, etc. and all of those things. The other advantage which is associated with this is that they can be our R&D partner in future. What are the concerns which are associated with giving the weapons to this country? See, the concerns that are associated with them is that they are going to be giving this on loan. So the point for this is that the payments will be slower. Okay, so payments will be slower in this situation as far as the country A being provided these weapons is concerned. And then there is always a credit risk also which is created as a result of this money being given to us. Okay, so those are, मतलब ये कुछ challenges हैं. अब तीसरा ऑप्शन क्या अवेलेबल है हमारे पास? एक ऑप्शन और भी अवेलेबल है जो केस स्टडी में ही दिया हुआ है, which is basically that there is a complete refusal that is supposed to be exercised in this situation. See, the complete refusal, if it is exercised in this situation, would also come with certain pointers. Now, firstly, see, if it is ethically justifiable कि हम किसी को भी weapon नहीं बेचेंगे ये, but then the bigger problem with this is that we will never be able to test our technology, and secondly, this will be a significant loss of revenue for the government as well. This will be a significant loss of foreign exchange also, which will happen to us if this does not happen, and this will be loss of jobs, and this will be also an opportunity to become a leading technology power across the world. So those are some of the threats which will be associated with this particular situation. Now, what I would therefore suggest in this will be, my recommendation will be that we select country A, because of very obvious reasons as we have discussed, but this selection of country A should be subject to safeguards. और ये safeguards बताने जरूरी हैं, that there should be certain safeguard that should be put in place. Firstly, we need to check the humanitarian record of this country. Right? So there has to be humanitarian record verification that should be done on this country. The second thing that we can basically mention is that there should be a threat assessment also that should be carried out of this country. कि क्या ये कहीं इनको किसी और चीज के लिए तो यूज नहीं करेंगे. दूसरी एक और इंपॉर्टेंट चीज ये है that we need to ensure IP protection, that they do not use our information or our intellectual property that has been created while developing these weapons. The other thing that we can mention is that we must take a sovereign guarantee from this country. ये लोन लेके ले रहे हैं, पर ये हमें सॉवरेन गारंटी दें कि अगर ये फेल कर जाएंगे तो ये अपने कंसोलिडेटेड फंड से हमें पैसा पे करेंगे. द अदर थिंग दैट वी कैन मेंशन इज दैट बिकॉज ऑर्डर लार्ज है, वी विल गिव अ फेज्ड डिलीवरी ऑफ द ऑर्डर विच विल बी अगेन सब्जेक्ट टू all these conditions as well. The other point that we can also mention is that we must have some kind of a mechanism such as serial tracking, so that these weapons are not used against innocent human beings. Okay, and ideally, other thing that we should ensure is that we follow international law fully, and this will keep in consonance with Article 51 of the Indian Constitution as well, which imposes a responsibility on the state in India in order to ensure that the state functions in the interest of the citizens of the country, in the interest of international law, and follows international law, shows respect for international law, etc. and all of those things. इस केस स्टडी में मैं एक चीज और बोलूंगा कि क्योंकि कंट्री बी किसी और सप्लायर से भी बात कर रहा है, we should not let that affect us. If they want to go and procure weapons from someone else, that has nothing to do with us, but we should not come under any kind of pressure on the basis of this. इसमें लास्ट में जब मैं आंसर लिखूंगा तो मैं इसमें अशोका को कोट कर सकता हूं, where I can say that Ashoka in Kalinga war gives us an important lesson, that the effectiveness of war is not the only thing that we should be worried about, or loss and victory in a war is not the only thing that we should be worried about, but we should also remember that war always comes with human tragedy and human cost as well, और उसे हमें किसी भी हाल में कॉम्प्रोमाइज नहीं करने देना चाहिए. Okay, so this is one of the approach that we can take for this case study. I would like to know what is that you would have done as far as this case study is concerned, and what is the approach that you would have taken if you had written the answer to this case study in the examination. Do let me know in the comment section, and I'll be interested in knowing what you do as far as this case study is concerned. अब हम आगे चलते हैं theoretical section की तरफ, which is section A. So the first question that was asked in section A was that owing to paucity of time, a university professor generates a PhD evaluation report using artificial intelligence. तो एक कैंडिडेट ने अपनी PhD रिपोर्ट अपने प्रोफेसर को दी और वो उसकी इवैल्यूएशन जो है AI के बेसिस पे करते हैं and submit it with some modification. He makes some little changes and submits it. Discuss this from perspective of accountability and integrity. So we have to discuss this from the perspective of accountability and integrity. Firstly, the central issue in this particular case is that AI assistance may help us in improving speed and language. But at the same time, professor cannot be outsourcing his work completely to AI or to some technology based tool. So that's the premise with which we will begin our answer in the paper. Now, पहले तो हम अकाउंटेबिलिटी के पर्सपेक्टिव से बात करते हैं कि क्या ये ठीक है. इज इट good from the accountability perspective that the professor is getting the AI report evaluated, the report evaluated from the AI. See, the first is that the professor has a duty. He has a duty towards the scholar, he has a duty towards the university and academic community, which will not be upheld if he will be performing this kind of an action. The second thing that I can also mention is that there is a PhD student whose career is at stake. And in this, if evaluation is done wrongly by the AI, in any case the student is going to be in suffering, because अगर AI जो है negative report देता है तो then the student will suffer drastically, और अगर student की report खराब है और AI अगर positive report देता है then it will end up compromising the principle of merit as well. So that is the third thing, which second thing that we can mention, right? So either it will lead to compromise merit or it will lead to compromising fairness. In any case, it is not acceptable. The third thing that we can mention is that, see, accountability की बात आती है तो उस रिपोर्ट को इवैल्यूएट करना प्रोफेसर की रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी थी, उसके अंदर गलतियां ढूंढना प्रोफेसर की रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी थी. एनी फ्लॉज इन इवैल्यूएशन वी कैन नॉट होल्ड AI accountable. And the principle of accountability would therefore originate, would dilute. और दूसरी बात देखिए ये है कि irrespective of अगर हम AI evaluate नहीं कर पाएगा तो प्रोफेसर की रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी और अकाउंटेबिलिटी तो रहेगी ही रहेगी. So in case something goes wrong, then the professor also risks his reputation in such a scenario. From an integrity perspective, why this action is wrong? Because firstly, it shows hypocrisy on part of the professor. वो खुद एक्सपेक्ट करता है कि कैंडिडेट जो है वो AI जनरेटेड रिपोर्ट ना दे, बट वो खुद उसको AI के थ्रू इवैल्यूएट करवा रहे हैं. सो दिस इज द फर्स्ट थिंग दैट वी कैन मेंशन. The second thing is that AI based assessment is misrepresentation. किसी और के काम को अपना काम दिखाना, right? So this is plagiarism also in many ways that is being done by the professor in such a situation. The third thing that I can mention is that it violates the principle of confidentiality as well, because that PhD scholar has given his report to you in full confidence and faith that you will not share it with anyone, but you have done that, go on ahead and share it with the AI without the consent of that individual. That may be a person's entire lifetime's hard work and you have just given it to the AI like that, right? So this is one of the things that we can mention. अब देखिए इस क्वेश्चन के अंदर हमें फाइनली ये बोलना चाहिए that see, if AI is used in a limited manner by the professor, say for example for running a fact check, or if the AI is used for grammatical check or grammar check, or if the AI is used for simply time management to save some time but not to save the entire time, then this is okay. Now in this case, what I would suggest is that the professor must go ahead and must read the thesis themselves. ये उनको खुद को thesis को पढ़ना जरूरी है. They must independently test the thesis of that student, because student is actually relying on their expertise to understand what are the flaws which are there in the thesis. और अगर आपको लगता है कि paucity of time है, then in that case they can seek extension, or they can even return the assignment back to the PhD scholar, and that would help them in still ensuring that they have upheld the idea of integrity as far as their action is concerned. इसके ऊपर यूपीएससी बाय द वे पहले क्वेश्चन पूछ चुकी है, नॉट इन एग्जैक्टली द सेम फॉर्म, बट देयर वाज अ क्वेश्चन दैट हैड बीन आस्क्ड इन 2024 with respect to the use of AI in decision making. Similarly, in 2020, UPSC had asked a question on or 2021, sorry, in fact, UPSC had asked a question on use of digital technology. Use of digital technology in, again, rational decision making. तो UPSC question पूछ चुकी है इस टॉपिक के ऊपर, but this question required a slightly different approach in order to write the answer in a proper manner. Now, let's move on and let's go on to the next question. So this next question is about a business house that is working on a project which will lead to displacement of a forest community from their habitat. As the administrative officer of that district, what ethical challenges are you likely to face? So what are the ethical challenges that the officer may face? First and foremost, they will face the challenge of balancing development with rights of indigenous people. So that's the first challenge that this officer is going to face. The second challenge that this officer is going to face is to ensure that they follow the procedure fairly in the displacement of those individuals. कि जो भी जिसको भी वहां से डिस्प्लेस किया जाए वो एक कंसल्टेटिव तरीके से किया जाए, फ्री तरीके से किया जाए. द थर्ड इज दैट देयर शुड बी सब्सटैंटिव फेयरनेस एज वेल, विच इज when these people are displaced from their land, there should be some kind of resettlement opportunities or rehabilitation that should be provided to them. The fourth challenge which he is going to face in this situation is power asymmetry. The indigenous people are going to be fighting against a big corporate or a business house, and that is one of the biggest challenges that this individual would have to face. There may also be challenges of possibly individuals offering there may also be challenges of individual being offered bribes and possibility of corruption as well. Okay, so that is also one of the things that can be mentioned. Then we can also say that there is a possible conflict of interest also that he may have to face, where there may be some pressure from politicians or from seniors that he may have to face in order to get this project executed in the best possible manner. There is also a challenge of climate and environmental destruction that may happen as a result of setting up of these businesses. So we need to ensure sustainable development, and we also need to ensure we uphold the idea of intergenerational equity. We need to uphold the concept of intergenerational equity as well. Okay, so these are some of the things that the officer will be facing as a challenge. Now, what is the recommended approach going to be in this situation? When the displacement is done, the most important thing that the officer must be doing is that they must conduct a social impact assessment before displacement. Secondly, they must verify the claims and titles of the community in a proper manner. So they must verify the claims and titles of the community in a proper manner. The third thing is that there should be consultations that must be conducted with the community to understand their view on this entire displacement exercise, and this should be done with the help of Gram Sabha and any of the community institutions. Lastly, what we can also mention is that ideally displacement should be the last resort. But if this last resort has to be followed, then it should be followed with a due process. It should be followed in a proper manner. So that is one of the things that we can mention as far as this is concerned. ये केस स्टडी के अंदर हम नर्मदा बचाओ आंदोलन और हम जो अभी ग्रेट निकोबार प्रोजेक्ट के बारे में बात हो रही है उसके रिस्पेक्ट में भी कुछ रेफरेंसेस दे सकते हैं. Okay, so this was a fairly simple question that could have been dealt with easily. Now let's move on to the next question. An endangered tribe has developed a skeletal. An endangered tribe, has developed a severe skeletal deformity, and a university research has identified mineral supplement as a possible remedy. Though clinical trials are yet to be conducted on this drug, on this particular remedy which has been suggested, but should the district magistrate of the district use this research on the tribe, and we have to discuss from the perspective of medical and administrative ethics. So let's try to understand this. Now, firstly, इसके अंदर अब क्या-क्या questions वो पूछ रहा है? That should the district magistrate be using this research on the tribe and discuss from perspective of medical and administrative ethics. देखिए, पहले तो हम इसको medical ethics के perspective से discuss करने की कोशिश करते हैं. देखिए, कोर कॉन्फ्लिक्ट तो इस पर्टिकुलर केस के अंदर यही है that there is an urgent relief that is supposed to be provided to a community which has been diagnosed with a problem, but there are no clinical trials that prove the efficacy of that medicine. The medical ethics that are involved in this case is that there is a potential treatment that may be given to these people that may prevent disability among the community. The second thing that we can mention is that the medical ethic that is involved is absence of clinical trials is there. So there are no clinical trials that have been conducted, and there is always a possibility that this medicine may actually do more harm than the good that it may cause for the people of this particular community. The third is that of autonomy. Do the people, those who are providing the consent for this, involve the tribal community? Are we taking the consent of the tribal community in providing this treatment to them? If not, then don't they have the autonomy over their own body? Don't they have the autonomy over their own life? So that is the other thing that we must keep in mind. Then the other challenge is that of the violation of principle of equality. If the clinical trial of this drug has to be even conducted, why should it be done only on that tribal community but not on the other people as well? So that is also something that we can mention. Then the fifth thing that we can also mention is that a study being projected as a treatment in itself is a big concern from the perspective of medical ethics. किसी भी एक स्टडी को ट्रीटमेंट नहीं बुलाया जा सकता है जब तक उसके ऊपर क्लिनिकल ट्रायल ना हो जाए, till the time clinical trials are conducted properly. तो ये तो कुछ हुए as far as medical ethics are concerned. Now, what are some of the administrative ethics that are involved in this case? See, firstly, the DM does not have any authority to conduct clinical trials. It has to be done by the concerned authority only. So from administrative ethics perspective, this is beyond the area of expertise as well as that of functioning of DM's office. So they will be actually overstepping their mandate if they will be conducting any such kind of clinical trials. The second one is that it may create a conflict with the institution as well. The educational institution that has developed this drug, there may be a conflict with them also, because if they seek some kind of funding or if they seek some kind of publication of this particular matter. The third thing is that the administrative ethics would ideally require to create trust with the community. Would ideally require one to create trust with the community. One has to overcome this entire challenge. So ये कुछ administrative ethics के aspect हैं. अब इस case के अंदर recommended course of action क्या होना चाहिए? See, what I would suggest is that what can be done is that a population-wide use of this drug performed without any kind of clinical trial is absolutely wrong and cannot be justified and should not happen in any situation. Ideally, what should be happening in this situation is that this drug must be referred to ICMR for them to perform clinical trials properly and to judge the efficacy of this medicine and of any side effects that may also come onto the individual as a result of that. अगर ये साइंटिफिकली अप्रूव हो भी जाए क्लिनिकल ट्रायल के बाद, तब भी इसका यूज फेजेस में होना चाहिए. Use should happen only in phases of this particular medicine. Okay, so that's one of the things that we can mention here. और एक चीज हम ये कह सकते हैं that as DM, what he can do is that he can provide immediate medical attention and care to the community. The other thing which can be done is that hold consultations with the community to make them aware that there is a medicine like this which has been developed, but it carries certain potential side effects and risks, and till the time clinical trials are completed, we will not be going ahead with something like this. Okay, so that's what we will be mentioning in this. अब ये वाला जो क्वेश्चन है, ये 2024 के अंदर ही यूपीएससी ने एक केस स्टडी पूछा था, जहां पे एक फार्मास्यूटिकल रिसर्चर को प्रेशर किया जा रहा है कि आप जो है क्लिनिकल ट्रायल्स को जल्दी कीजिएगा. Right? So you speed up clinical trials. This was a question that had already been asked by UPSC. So if you had gone through that particular case study, then you would have probably been able to solve this case study as well. Now let's move on to the next one. This is a very generic kind of a question and probably the simplest one, and I will not be really talking a lot about it. How can national security be balanced with concerns of human rights? कैसे हम national security को human rights के साथ balance कर सकते हैं? That is what this question is all about. Now, see again, normally what you would begin the answer with is that whenever there is action that is taken by the state against terrorism, or whether it is insurgency, or whether the state takes action against Naxalism, then in such situation, often the state has to use force. And whenever state uses force, it often leads to violation of human rights. Often the state ends up using excessive force as well. And there are concerns that are therefore raised in such a situation. So this happens also because there are often some tortures that are conducted by the security agencies. There may be often the situation of rape and sexual assault being conducted against women as well. And plus we may also mention that there are often fake encounters also that are done in order to overcome such situations. Now, what are therefore the ethical ways, or how we can balance these two, right? What are the ways in which these ideas can be balanced? See, the first one is any action of the state that must be taken in such situation must be as per the law. Second is any action of the state that must be taken must be proportionate in nature to the threat which is created by that individual or by that group of people. They should not be using excessive force. The third is that this force should only be used against individuals and not against community. तो पूरी एक कम्युनिटी को जिम्मेदार ठहरा देना और उनको डिक्लेयर कर देना as the enemies of the entire society and of the nation, that would also not be correct. The next point that we can also mention here is that we should try to win the hearts and the minds of the community and try to get the goodwill of the community in our hands if we have to truly ensure and balance national security, especially in areas which are affected by Naxalism, especially in those areas which are affected by insurgency, terrorism, etc. So the VAM strategy to win over the hearts and the minds of the community can be done. The fifth thing that we can do is that we need to be bringing in use of technology. Right? So use of technology can be done, especially surveillance technology, so that we use excessive force to a lesser manner. Right? So that's another thing. What we can also mention is periodic review should be done of deployment of forces in such areas. So periodic review to be done of deployment of forces in any such areas where there is insurgency or where there is terrorism etc. तो ये भी हम mention कर सकते हैं. और lastly इसके अंदर हम ये भी बोल सकते हैं कि एक independent judicial audit होना ज़रूरी है, scrutiny होना ज़रूरी है on the actions that are taken by the members of the security agency. So that is what we can mention. इसके अलावा what we can also say is that because national security is at risk, before we take any action, we should have solid intelligence inputs. Second is, you can also mention about community policing as a strategy to win over the confidence of the people and the community and to make them involved in the policing activities. Training the security personnel in constitutional values, training them in sensitivity is also something that we can suggest in this answer. So ये कुछ चीजें हम कह सकते हैं. यहाँ पे मैं अगर आपकी जगह होता तो I would have definitely given the example of how we were able to overcome insurgency in Tripura or how we were able to overcome insurgency or militancy in Punjab due to the actions that were taken by the state police and the political will that was shown by the political leadership of the state. Now, next question is very interesting. There was recently a CJP protest that was going on. UPSC has picked up a statement from Ambedkar's speech. And this statement is that Dr. B.R. Ambedkar had cautioned that employing civil disobedience within a constitutional democracy equates to endorsing anarchy. If we indulge in constitutional civil disobedience, not obeying the laws, then in that case we are promoting anarchy. How should modern democracies navigate the ethical dilemmas that are posed by civil disobedience movements that aim to promote social justice against policies that may raise genuine concerns? So what are the things that we can basically mention here? Firstly, हमें इसमें दो चीजें करनी है इस आंसर के अंदर. एक तो हमें ये बताना है that why ethically civil disobedience movement are unjustified. Why ethically civil disobedience movement are unjustified. And the second one is, from an ethical perspective, we have to also justify the civil disobedience movement. अगर unethical perspective से देखेंगे हम तो हम ये कह सकते हैं that see, we have democratically elected government, we have courts in the country, so then why do people need to take to the streets to go for civil disobedience? The second one is that it may lead to selective law breaking, or sorry, it may lead to law breaking as well by the individuals when any such civil disobedience movements are organized. Some mischievous elements may also come in. Third is that usually it is only the privileged people in the society, those who are able to participate in such movements, not the daily wagers and the laborers and the real masses of the society. And the fourth thing that we can also mention is that these movements may be captured by wrong elements who may indulge in violence, and it may also lead to promoting misinformation. It may also end up promoting misinformation in the society. Now, in what circumstances can I defend any such civil disobedience movement ethically in the society? When we can say that even though there are constitutional means that are available to us to raise questions, but unfortunately, constitutional means do not work practically. A very simple example that I can give here is that there is hardly any debate that is happening in the parliament today. Budgets are being passed by the parliament without any kind of discussion. The second thing that we can say is that law is not always moral, or law is not always just. So there can be a situation where there is a law that allows us to do something, but the law itself is unjust. In those cases, when the law itself is unjust, then we have to raise our voice against injustice. As Gandhi would say, that if we do not raise our voice against injustice, then we are ourselves being a part of injustice. So that is the third thing that we can mention. Then the fourth thing that we can mention here is that it has possibility of creating awareness among people. दूसरी देखिए, मैं ये बात यहाँ पे ऐसा भी बोलता दैट अंबेडकर हिमसेल्फ हैड यूज्ड सत्याग्रह एज अ टेक्निक अगेंस्ट caste exclusion, so why should other people not be using the same? Now once I have mentioned this and once I have mentioned in what situation can it be justified, मैं ये भी बोल सकता हूँ कि अगर नॉन वायलेंट है सिविल डिसोबिएंट मूवमेंट, then it is justified. If it is raising legitimate concerns of the society, then also it is justified. If it is raising legitimate concerns of the society, if it is non-violent in nature, then it is justified. Okay, so this is what we can say, mention. Now what should be the democratic response that should be provided by countries to these kind of civil disobedience movements that happen in their country? What is that we can mention? First and foremost, we should encourage peaceful dissent. Second, we should mention in this case that we should have safe protest sites in the country where people can go and carry out protests whenever they want to. This will help in not disturbing the law and order and the usual life as well. Then secondly, we need to understand, we need to distinguish between, we should be able to differentiate between civil disobedience and violent movements. ये हमें पता होना चाहिए. Even when we use force to disperse any of the protesters, it should be minimum force that should be used. Tear gas, etc. could be one of the things that we could be using in such a situation. And lastly, any government must encourage not only peaceful dissent and protest, but they should look at it as an opportunity to get feedback. They should perceive it as an opportunity to get feedback on the governance and the steps and the measures that have been taken by the citizens. So that is one of the things that we can mention as far as this question is concerned. Now let's move on to the next question. In what ways can an Indian administrative officer apply Gandhi's notion of trusteeship to ensure fairness in governance? किस तरीके से जो गांधी जी का आइडिया ऑफ ट्रस्टीशिप है उसको अप्लाई किया जा सकता है इन ऑर्डर टू एंश्योर फेयरनेस इन गवर्नेंस. आई होप आई डोंट नीड टू एक्सप्लेन गांधी जीज आइडियाज ऑफ ट्रस्टीशिप टू यू, तो मैं सीधा आगे बढ़ रहा हूं टू एक्सप्लेन हाउ इट कैन बी अप्लाइड. नाउ when we study the topic of utilization of public funds in administrative ethics, we talk about some of these ideas. So Gandhi ji's idea of trusteeship can be applied in the following manner. Trusteeship idea application. Firstly, as far as use of public funds is concerned, every civil servant must exercise due caution in utilization of public funds in such a manner that they are used only for public purpose and they are not wasted, and there is absolute efficiency that is ensured in the use of the public funds. The second thing that we can mention here is that the natural resources of the nation should also be used in such a manner that they should not be we should keep the idea of intergenerational equity in mind. These resources like water, like air, mountains, forests are not just for us but for the future generation as well, and we are trustees of the future generation to maintain these resources for them in an effective manner. The third that we can give as an example is that when decision making is done in the government, it is important that civil servants publish the criteria for those decisions that are taken by the government. There should be absolute transparency on why a decision has been taken by a government officer or by a government department. So that is also one of the examples that we can give. Similarly, we can also say that whenever any procurement happens in the government, at that point of time as well, Gandhi ji's idea of trusteeship should be applied. इसमें हम e-gem portal और ये सब चीज़ों के बारे में बात कर सकते हैं. We can also apply this idea in context of corporate governance as well. Right? Any corporate entity is actually being run on behalf of the society in many ways. So from that perspective as well, it is important that corporate governance के अंदर भी हम गांधी जी के idea of trusteeship को apply करते हैं. Now इसमें कुछ examples भी दे सकते हैं हम personalities का. We can give the example of T.N. Seshan. We may give the example of E. Sridharan, and so on and so forth. तो कुछ illustrations और examples जरूर दीजिएगा अपने answers के अंदर if you have to truly secure marks out of the examiner. Now, before I move on to the next question, another major announcement. On 31st of August, we are starting with an Achievers batch, which is going to be a 2 years comprehensive batch for preparation for the UPSC Civil Services examination. Classes begin on 31st of August at 7 p.m. I will be starting with the classes of polity and constitution in this batch on the 31st, where the orientation class is going to be on 31st. If you are interested, please do enroll in the course and I will see you in the class. Now, let's move on to the next question. Now, next question is actually related to ethics in international relations. And this question is essentially stating the following. It says that the arms are fair when the intent of bearing them is just. What ethical implications does this have in governance? So, the idea basically is that the use of the force is fair when the intent with which that force is being used is itself based on the idea of justice. What are the ethical implications that this have in governance? हम इसको स्पेशली ethics in international relations के perspective से just war theory के perspective से बात कर सकते हैं. The ethical implications in governance are going to be as follows. So ethical implications in governance of this particular idea is going to be as follows. Firstly, we can say that use of any such arms or force should be done only by people, those who have legitimate authority to do so. Secondly, use of any such arms should be done only for a just cause. हम example दे सकते हैं 1971 war का of India with Pakistan, or we can also give the example of Operation Sindoor in our examples. The third thing that we should mention is that the damage that should be caused as a result of the use of the force should be proportionate to the objective that we are trying to achieve. The fourth is that it should be a last resort. We should have exhausted all the options of dialogue and peaceful negotiations, and only then the use of the force should be done. Fifth is that we should follow the policy of discrimination between civilians and the armed forces officials. So there should be discrimination between civilians and non-civilians in such situations and circumstances. The sixth thing that we can also mention is that any such use of force should be only done in an accountable manner with written orders only, and there should be some kind of responsibility of the person also who's using the force so that it is not misused as well. And lastly, there should be a reasonable chance of success as well of the use of force in any such situation. So हम इसके बारे में भी specifically mention कर सकते हैं, right? So those are some of the things that we can mention, but at the same time, in this answer I would also mention, simply because intentions are correct, it would not necessarily always lead to right outcomes in the use of force. One simple example will be that often dictators justify the right intentions in order to use force and arms against their own citizens, and that is of course not always going to be just in use. The second thing is that use intention can be correct, but what if my means are wrong? My intention is correct, but if I use torture as a means in order to achieve the desired objectives, would that be correct? So that is also something which I can talk about. इसमें हम specifically बात कर सकते हैं that this can be very useful in, these principles can be very useful in situation of riot control. These principles can be very useful in anti-terror operations, and this can also be useful in the action that is taken by one nation against the forces of the other nation as well. Now, let's move on to the next question. Citing the serious adverse consequences of long-term medication, a doctor convinces the family of a female patient, ये बड़ा important है, female patient, for surgery. तो एक डॉक्टर जो है वो कन्विंस कर देता है फैमिली को, उस लड़की की, that there are going to be serious long-term implications of the medicine that she will be consuming. Therefore, it's better for her to undergo a surgery. This led the patient to reluctantly consent for surgery. So she was not really agreeing to this surgery, but it's because that the doctor had convinced her family that she went ahead and gave approval for the surgery, though her original choice was to opt for medication. Explain the concept of paternalism and beneficence by analyzing the doctor's actions. In my opinion, this was perhaps one of the toughest questions that was asked in the examination this year, अगर आपने specially medical ethics नहीं पढ़ा है तभी तक तो. Now, firstly, what is the principle of beneficence? Principle of beneficence is that there is a duty which every doctor has to promote the welfare of their patient and to prevent the harm that will be caused to them. The theory of paternalism or the idea of paternalism is that when you override the will of a person by telling them what is right for them without even taking their consent. तो इस सिचुएशन में फैमिली जो है वो लड़की को बता रही है दैट व्हाट इज गोइंग टू बी गुड फॉर यू, यू अंडरगो सर्जरी, यू डू नॉट अंडरगो द मेडिकल ट्रीटमेंट. And why is she being told this by the family? Because they have been told by the doctor on the basis of the medical paternalism which he is showing in this situation. तो इसमें ये क्वेश्चन पूछ रहा है, citing serious adverse effects of long term medication, this and that and everything, explain the concepts of paternalism and beneficence. So we have to first explain these two concepts and then we have to analyze the actions of the doctor. So let's try to understand and analyze the actions of the doctor. So analysis of actions of the doctor. Analysis of the actions of the doctor. The first analysis of the action of the doctor is that the doctor should recommend what is clinically more superior, and that is what their goal should be. So the ideal aspect will be that doctor in this situation did the ethical thing or took an ethical, it is ethically justified from the doctor because they went as per clinical experience and knowledge to explain that in this situation the person should undergo what is clinically superior, what is clinically proven. The second thing is that in this case the doctor's action were ethically concerning also because they did not explain consequences to the girl, to the patient, rather family, which shows paternalism on part of the doctor. It also shows in many ways familial paternalism, and it also shows gendered paternalism as well, which is अगर ये लड़का होता तो शायद उससे पूछा जाता. Then the other thing is that assent that was given by the girl was reluctant assent. Now reluctant assent in itself is not wrong, but the doctor's duty was in this case to see that it is not given due to undue influence or it has not been given due to coercion. That is what doctor's duty was in this particular situation. And therefore what we can say is that ideally for the doctor, and see the other thing what the doctor did was they did not explain the detailed consequences of both course of actions. That is what the doctor ideally should have done. Now, once we are done with this, let us try to understand what ethically appropriate course could have been taken by the doctor in this case. Course that the doctor could have taken. In this situation, the first thing that the doctor could have done is they could have spoken privately to the patient and tried to explain to them the consequences of both course of action. Secondly, they should have tried to clarify to the patient that the final decision is of the patient. Right? The final decision is ultimately that of the patient. Third, document reasons for consent being given by the patient, right? So this is what ideally should have been the course of action that should have been taken by the doctor. And if despite this as well, the patient would have knowingly taken medication as a course and not gone for surgery, then it was her personal choice to do so. Anyway, let's move on to the next question. Efficiency is doing right things, while effectiveness is doing the right thing. How do you strike a balance between the two to enhance productivity? See, efficiency is basically doing something in minimal resources, whereas effectiveness is doing something to achieve the actual outcomes of that particular idea which we start with. Now, firstly, in this question, after explaining the definition of efficiency and effectiveness with the help of an example, I would have mentioned that why imbalance between the two is harmful. Why imbalance between efficiency and effectiveness is harmful. Where I can say, for example, let's say in a Lok Adalat, there is a lot of efficiency but no effectiveness at times. As they say, justice hurried is justice buried. Often the arguments that are made in the Lok Adalat are so fast and so rapid, the decisions that are given by the Lok Adalat are so fast and so rapid that it never really leads to justice. So one practical example of why efficiency without effectiveness actually has no meaning itself. The other example that I can also give is, let's say when I am examining claims for relief to flood affected individuals. I'm doing the efficient part of it by giving relief in a speedy manner, but if it is not reaching the right people, then what's the purpose of doing the entire thing anyway? The example of effective but inefficient will be a government scheme which has been able to achieve the desired results, but it was done in excessive amount of time. We can give the example of a bridge constructed and works really well, but was constructed in cost overruns. We may give the example of CWG. Commonwealth Games were organized in India in 2010 in an effective manner, but were they efficient? There was a lot of money of the taxpayers that was wasted in organizing these. Therefore, how do we balance the two? How do we balance the two? Firstly, before any function is performed, outcomes must be defined. Second, and more importantly, we should ensure that there are some non-negotiables that are always identified in such situation which we will never compromise on, come whatever may, come whatever the situation may be with respect to efficiency. The third thing that we can mention is citizen feedback, consumer feedback can always help us in improving efficiency and effectiveness both. Fourth is decentralize decision making and give more power to the people to decide what should be the outcomes, what should be the objectives that we are trying to achieve. And lastly, also talk about simplifying the processes. Simplifying the processes. Okay. So these are some of the things that we can mention as far as the entire idea of doing this balancing between the effectiveness and efficiency is concerned. इसमें हम कुछ example दे सकते हैं. Delhi Metro is a perfect example of how efficiency was balanced with effectiveness. So these are some of the things that we can mention as far as this particular question is concerned. Now let's move on to the next question. Next question is, usually schools working in remote areas do not fully comply with government regulations. रिमोट एरियाज के अंदर जो स्कूल है वो आरटी के रेगुलेशंस की तरह पूरी तरीके से कंप्लाई नहीं करते हैं. हाउएवर इफ द रूल्स आर एनफोर्स्ड स्ट्रिक्टली इट वुड लीड टू मोस्ट स्कूल्स क्लोजिंग डाउन. हाउ शुड एन एडमिनिस्ट्रेटर स्ट्राइक अ बैलेंस बिटवीन एनफोर्समेंट ऑफ रूल्स एंड एजुकेशनल राइट्स ऑफ चिल्ड्रन? Again, a case study or a question about balancing rules versus the rights of the citizens. See, the central conflict in this particular case is again the same, that regulations protect safety of the children in the schools. Regulations ensure good quality education, but at the same time, those regulations can also come in the way of achieving the desired objectives. Now, what we have to talk about is what are the how can an administrator strike balance between enforcement of rules and educational rights of the children? सबसे पहले तो इस क्वेश्चन के अंदर अगेन आप कुछ एथिकल इश्यूज और डायमेंशंस हाईलाइट कर दीजिएगा. पहला एथिकल इशू और जो डायमेंशन हाईलाइट करने की जरूरत वो ये है दैट देयर इज अ मॉरल हजार्ड दैट इज इन्वॉल्व्ड इन अलाउइंग द रूल्स टू बी वायलेटेड in the name of rights, because then it can slowly and gradually become a norm in the society. The second thing that we can also mention is that ultimately it is the government's accountability or responsibility to ensure effective functioning of schools. And in the name of regulations, they cannot deny rights to the citizens. The third idea that I can also talk about is that education ultimately is for the benefit of the child. Or education ultimately is for the benefit of the children, and therefore they must not bear, children must not pay the price of state inefficiency. The state inefficiency, children must not be paying the price for the same. That's also one of the things that we can mention. और fourth बात हम ये कह सकते हैं that there should be a way to differentiate. See, if the regulation is that the school building should be safe and it is not safe, and because of that the child is not able to because of that you are shutting down the school, it is okay. But because there are some facilities like a playground is not available in the school, or say for example that some very innocuous facility is not available in the school which is not really going to determine the learning outcome of the child, then in that case it is okay to go ahead and to even dilute some of the rules and regulations in some place. Now, therefore, in this case, what should be the recommended course of action for a civil servant? Firstly, conduct a compliance audit of all the schools in such areas to identify what the exact situation is on the ground. Second is, some non-negotiables should be laid down. For example, child safety is a non-negotiable and that should not be compromised in under any circumstance or situation, and in that case the school has to be shut down. The third is, infrastructural development must be carried out in such schools with the support of the local community and with the support of the government. The other thing which can be done in such remotely located schools is use of technology. We may also mention about pooling of teachers, pooling of classrooms. We can also talk about a hub and a spoke model to be adopted in such remotely located schools. Okay, so those are the course of action that we can suggest in these cases. और हम ये बोल सकते हैं that education should not be denied to any child for the want of the inaction of the state. Now let's move on to the second part of the fifth question. In international relations, ethical considerations are often subjugated to strategic interest of nation states. Discuss this from an ethical perspective. ये question UPSC इतनी बार पूछ चुकी है कि मैं आपको क्या बताऊं. See, often what happens is because in international relations there is no one single authority. what tends to happen is that states tend to prioritize survival, national interest over the ethical values and ethical issues, right? But at the same time, we have to mention that strategic interest should not be the only consideration in the minds of the people, but it should be ethical considerations as well. Otherwise, what will happen? You will end up providing support to dictators. You may end up providing support to people, those who violate the human rights of people in their own country. It may also affect the soft power of the nations. If we only give importance to strategic interests, then we will be losing out on the soft power, which also is a part of the power of any nation in today's day and age. We may also talk about that how the violation of the treaties that may be done in order to achieve strategic interest may show double standards on part of the nations. So there are a lot of things that can be mentioned here. And then lastly, what we should also mention is that, see, humanity should know no borders. If there is wrong thing that is happening in one part of the world, it should be stopped irrespective of whatever may be the strategic outcome of that action for any nation. Anyway, now let's move on to the last question. Okay, the last question, two parts. On request of his personal assistant, the district magistrate stops the transfer of a school teacher who takes private tuition for his daughter diagnosed with learning disability. So his daughter has been diagnosed with learning disability, and he is organizing the the daughter of the of the district magistrate. On the request of his personal assistant, the district magistrate stops the transfer of a school teacher who takes private tuition for his daughter diagnosed with learning disability. In this context, discuss the aspects of empathy versus compliance with rules. अब देखिए यहाँ पे हो क्या रहा है that there is a disabled child whose tuitions are being taken by a specific teacher. If that teacher will be transferred, it will be very difficult for the child to get educated. That child may have also got adjusted to that particular teacher's teaching style. But at the same time, the request is coming from the personal assistant of the district magistrate. If that person would not have known the district magistrate, then in that case, the transfer would not have happened. So there are a number of ethical issues that are involved in this case, which we need to be aware of. Firstly, what are the arguments against going ahead with the transfer? So arguments against transfer. Firstly, what we can mention is that disability related education is very difficult and continuity of education for that child would suffer as a result of this. So the first thing is that. Secondly, we could also mention that empathy requires us to show empathy towards people, those who are in a difficult situation, and which means that we should have disabled friendly attitude. And therefore, we should try to resolve the problem from the perspective of the child who will be affected as a result of the same. And also, there is a substantive accommodation that is often required in order to achieve equity. So in this case, some kind of adjustment, if it is made in favor of a child who's suffering from disability, would not be absolutely wrong. Now, what are the arguments in favor of transfer or arguments against intervention? Firstly, what we can say is that there is a clear conflict of interest that is involved in this situation where the public office will be used for private gains. The second thing that we can also mention is that the PA has a privileged access to the DC. Would the same treatment we have given to the other individuals if their children would have been studying from such a teacher? The other thing that we can also mention is that the other students who will be taught by that transfer teacher would suffer as a result of such a situation. So in this situation, even genuine compassion can actually be considered as something wrong. Now, what should therefore be done in this situation? Let's discuss that. Actually, ethical course of action kya hoga? Ethical course of action ye hoga that we should look for an arrangement of an alternate teacher for the child. The second ethical course that we can do is that we should disclose the conflict of interest in this situation before making any kind of order. The third is that we may allow no transfer on compassionate grounds, but reasons to be stated. So reason need to be stated for the same. And we should try to examine other alternatives. For example, a special educator, or now technology is available. So the teacher, just like me, could be sitting in a room and could be teaching the student as well. Okay. Now let's move on to the last question. Some moral philosophers argue that spending some of your resource without significantly affecting your financial stability to help other people who badly suffer is our moral duty. It is our moral duty to help those who are in need by spending some of our money, and not merely a matter of charity. Justify this claim by explaining the distinction between duty and charity. See, firstly, we have to explain what is the distinction between duty and charity. Duty is something which is a moral obligation of an individual, whereas charity is something that is done out of will of a person. So that is the first thing. Now, what are the arguments against that assistance is a duty? See, if you can prevent a serious suffering for a particular person by putting some bit of one can say limitation on your own expenditure, then what is wrong in that? You know, in the good of the larger people lies the good of everyone, right? So from a utilitarian perspective. Secondly, we as human beings have a duty to perform towards the entire society and not just towards our family. And that's one of the points that I can also be mentioning. Third thing that I can also be mentioning here is that, would I have wanted the other person to act in the same manner had I been in the situation of that poor and destitute man? अगर मेरे सामने एक आदमी है जिसके पास बहुत सारा खाना है और वो मेरे को बहुत भूख लगी है और वो मुझे थोड़ा सा खाना भी नहीं दे रहा है, would I have wanted that person to treat me in such a manner? So that is one of the things that we can mention. Philosophical perspective से भी हम इसको ये बोल सकते हैं, वो जो Peter Singer का drowning analogy है, that if there is a child who is drowning and if you don't jump into the water simply because you care more about your clothes, then you are doing an unethical act. Even from the perspective of Kant, he says that helping others is obligatory, though one has discretion on when and whom to help. That discretion we continue to maintain. We can give the counter argument as well, that ultimately our duty to help others is a limited duty. That while doing that duty, we should not put ourselves at risk, and we should not be spending our entire own life savings as well and not taking care of our own family while we are doing duty towards the others and to save them. And lastly, ultimately, to help the poor people, isn't it the responsibility of the state as well? So individuals doing their duty should not become an alibi for the state to say that this is not our work to be performed. So that's what can be written in this answer. I am of course rushed through the last two answers because there was paucity of time and I wanted to finish this session in time. But I hope you enjoyed this session and you learned a lot on how to approach the answer writing, how to approach solving these questions, and do share your feedback in comments. I would be really curious to listen to what you have to say. My Telegram channel is you can search t.me/JatinPolity and you can find the notes for this session there. And I will be sharing some of the model answers for paper 2 and paper 4 there, which you can refer and which you can practice answer writing, and you can see that how your answers compare to the model answers. This is all that I had from my end. Thanks a lot for attending this session. I would always be grateful for all the love and the support that you have shown towards me. Thank you again for being a part of this session, and I will be seeing you very soon tomorrow at the Unacademy Plus platform with my special class. Thank you again. All the best.